Okay, we're good.
You can't make a proposal in closed session.
I motion that we come into closed session.
And that you discussed only those items that you went into closed session to discuss.
Second.
Okay,
Vote, please.
Director Freeman.
Aye.
Director Trant.
Aye.
Director Appelt.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Metz.
Aye.
And Chairman Moore.
Aye. Okay.
So, we need a proposal.
I think you need a motion to do the proposal.
I motion that we instruct director. We make a motion. I make a motion. We instruct Alan Metz to propose a. I want to say contract. I want to say structure a proposal
Consistent with the discussion in closed session.
consistent with the instructions given.
Second to that? Second from. Vote, please.
Director Freeman.
Aye.
Director Trant.
Aye.
Director Appelt.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Metz. Aye. And Chairman Moore.
Aye. Okay. Thank you,
I don't know
guys.
if you want me to help you with that a little bit. I will. It's up to you. I say if you need some help, I don't think you do. But if you need some help, give me a call. Give Wayne a call.
Next item is unfinished business. First item is revisiting the teen center maintenance, and this has been a discussion now ongoing for a couple of months. In most recent meeting, there was some discussion trying to get some feedback from the city to find out really if there was any interest in the teen center being used for any public city purpose. And the ultimate feedback that came back was the city has no interest in the property. And so at this point, their recommendation is that it's our choice as to whether we want to try to build some funds to do some maintenance on the property while we do try to market and dispose of the property. The city has gotten what they needed from the purchase of that property ultimately, which was the right away there at, we'll say, the confusion corner of the boat, Layden Way and all the other intersecting roads there. So I guess I bring that back for a discussion, understanding that really there is no public city interest in this property for further use outside of disposing of the property amongst council.
Paying to heat it right now. With zero.
The lease. There's a lease for utilities from a civic group, the wrestling club.
That's generally my view of it.
Yeah, because you're wasting money.
Wrestling club pays the utilities from November through March 1. November 1 through March 1. Outside of that, it's being paid through the city.
Highest and best use is what, grow grass?
Or residential, it's zoned residential.
Some question, and I know you're familiar with it, between the players and I guess the wrestling, there's no budget that either have to even look at a long-term acquisition of something. Is it just shoestring? No benefactor like the booth?
The booth,
Not at this point, there's not a financial.
There's just nothing there.
Well, resale is always a possibility.
Certainly,
Particularly if you can do something with residential.
well, and certainly I think possibly putting it out MLS listing or something as a residential opportunity. There may be some interest in pursuing that. As the EDA, I ask you, is there any reason you can't put it out as an MLS listing?
You can list it MLS for sale. Come up with the price. It's a commercial building, somewhere you're going to list it with Allen as a commercial, or whether you want to put it with a, residential real estate agent for residential purposes, but you got every authority to list it, to sell it.
The downside of the commercial building side is a non-conforming use in the zoning, residential zoning, and so all of a sudden.
Yeah, every time we've had a commercial use, like a church or a thrift store, it just doesn't fit, and it's just not a path I think we even want to explore.
You just realize if it goes for residential purposes, whatever price you put on it, the buyer's going to say, well, I got to spend $17,000 to tear a building down. So, that's going to, there goes part of your price, because nobody's going to buy what they're factoring in to tear the building down. And I can tell you, to tear it up, I know there's asbestos in that building, and that building's not coming down cheap. That's not going to be a $5,000 demolition job. It's going to be somebody having to go there and pay attention with it.
We're going 100 on that, you've been right.
Well,
We got a quote on it at one time, wasn't it? I don't know, 15, 20?
that's why I threw the number 17,000. I remember a $15,000 or $20,000 number way back.
Don't you can do that cheap.
Well, not only that, you have that big concrete block in the middle of it, solid concrete ground to the floor level. Whatever reason, because the switching station required it.
That's a telephone company building. And Henry and there was a sledgehammer and chisel, and they worked on it.
You want to suggest a dollar amount that we had, if you want to ask for maintenance money? Here's the quote from, besides what the city did, Angle Construction had that quote passed around last time for $840 just to look at the indoor, outdoor
Heating air conditioning unit.
I don't think so. And the only way if we're parting with this, I wouldn't invest any more money in the main. Question in my mind, I don't throw good money after bad, is do we want to buy the demolition ourselves so we're assured that the end user builds something new there? I mean, I'd hate to sell it and all of a sudden we got that, that building's still there. It could really be an eyesore. It hasn't been just because we own it.
a nice building. I mean, it's a solid building, it just hasn't been maintained.
What staff would, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I don't think we want people living in that building, do we? I mean, are you?
I don't know that it's ideally, it was never intended, in my understanding, as a resident. It just happens to be zoned in a residential area as residential. What we can do, if the EDA is of a mind, staff can go back and speak with community development and Ann. If you were interested in at least exploring the possibility, assuming that you don't sell it immediately, at least looking at a placeholder number for some ongoing maintenance until it's sold, and I believe that Ann would be certainly willing to give us a number that you could contemplate at the February meeting as part of your budget process. I don't want to get ahead of things, but if that was a consideration and you wanted to know what the number would be for reasonable maintenance for the next year, certainly staff can bring that back to you in February, at least to contemplate if you'd like. Obviously, to Director Trant's point, you don't want to throw in a lot of money if you don't intend to keep the property, but just to keep it maintenanced.
Well, on Tim's point, I mean, I think you're trying to balance those two numbers. What's the cost of doing a demolition? If it's $17,000, what's the cost of doing some preventative maintenance just so it doesn't fall in on itself? You are able to sell it. If that's $10,000, well, maybe good money after bad, if the intent is that it.
And to be honest, that was part of it. My was more just focused on, okay, once we sell it, what are our brethren in the city going to be driving by? Is it going to be somebody living in that building, making it, a home? Or is it
Squeezing in some commercial use that just doesn't.
Exactly. Or is it, a nice new home that gets built on that, property by some local builder that looks like all the other.
properly positioned on the site, not 5 feet off the edge of the right of way.
My sense is
Take.
it's the latter, you know, I mean, if I owned it, that's probably what I'd, you know, personally, I'd probably knock the building down as cheaply as I could, get that issue resolved, and put it on the market for a house.
Well, then, for the benefit of the February meeting, someone have the ability to go through and look at what acreage of it off the top of my head, what a 0.8 acre parcel may run as a building lot in this.
Knocking the building down, that, once you sell to somebody coming in and not only having one lot,
Well,
I think.
you.
And if you do that, we don't know what the city's take is gonna be yet.
We do, that's already been documented, and
Has it? I haven't seen
the
it.
city's already
Huh?
done the take.
City's already surveyed and realigned the parcel.
I hadn't seen that. I don't think I have. So you could possibly get 2 lots there after you do the,
With the
I
right
don't
of way,
think so
I
now.
think the right of way is,
With that easement,
That
that
easement
cross
through the-
access.
Easement across the rear going to the other house. I don't know whether that's going to be counted into usable area, and I just don't know without. With Wally and folks downstairs and seeing what that potential is. It may have a potential for 2 lots, but.
It's point,
Right
is
now, I
zoned
don't see it.
R1 is 0.6 acres is what's left. I think that,
6. Well, you got, in that area, you gotta have 20,000
1,000
square feet, right?
So it's one lot.
that's what you got now?
0.6 acres.
0.6 is what's left.
So here's what it looks like.
It took a big chunk out of the front corner for the easement, well, not easement now.
possibility of that future
That's
roundabout.
after the take.
Yep, after the take is just
Oh,
what's,
okay.
and there's that easement that runs through it, which actually is gonna
Well, that kills it right there.
that'll make it a pretty odd shape.
Maybe that easement's negotiable now, you don't never know.
Just to kick open door number 2,
On the
which
backside of the
you can
property.
slam back.
Yeah, which we tried.
If Poquoson has a need for another community building, what it would really cost to make this thing right? I mean, has it, I'm not saying the budget would ever be there, but if you spend X to get a workable building for the long term,
Some of the community groups that were interested went pretty extensive in what they thought that they would have to invest in and what they'd have to do to make it usable. So,
I mean, just in my dealings with the building, 50 grand would give it a good boost. At the end of the day, there's a fair amount of, I mean, you gotta deal with the roof. Fascia trim, siding.
you don't see it as,
It may be 50 grand a year over 3 years may really kick it in the high gear.
The city told you there was no interest on the city's side.
That's
right?
correct.
And I think, and I would, again, ask Wally's input if I'm off the beam here, but I think once you do an improvement that equal to 50% of the assessed value, that catalyzes the requirement to raise the building if it's in a floodplain.
It also
I think I'm
requires you to
imagining
bring- If you do more than a certain percentage
think
of
that's-
improvement, you have to bring the whole building up to current
Yeah,
code.
maybe,
And
maybe
we
some
wouldn't live
ADA
long
and-
enough to bring that building.
But I hear what you're saying.
I
I mean, it's something to
I would
explore.
love nothing more than to see it continue as a community resource. My sense is, if it's going to, I think that's probably in my personal opinion, I'm slightly biased, my child's not wrestling, but just has wrestled and practiced it, is it, that's something for the city to do. I mean, I think the right thing to do is to, you know, either fix that up, redo it, or whatever, and keep it as a community asset, but that's the city's job to do that, not development parties. They don't want to do it, they don't want to take the property back, they want to do it. Our only option is to collect for as much money as we can get for it.
Sounds like for the February meeting, maybe we need to kind of revisit the demolition estimate that we got a year and a half ago.
Marty gave you that estimate, who gave you the estimate?
Was that Mr.
oh,
Engel?
somebody over in Virginia Beach, probably had them come up here at the time you did years ago, I think.
We'll have that number freshened for the February meeting.
Marty's right here in the city. I don't know whether he'd have
we
an
can
interest or
certainly-
not, but he, you know,
We can certainly contact him. Happy to do so.
We've never offered the property to the real estate community in terms of a residential use of that property.
Not
No, sir.
actively listed and
No, sir.
marketed as such. A couple of folks who I think have looked at that as opportunities. Discussion is, for February, is let's look at what down the road. To Tim's point, if we're not careful, you're going to wind up with this unmaintained building, at least up to date has been actively maintained and certainly has its challenges.
Approximately half-acre building lot, if we can clean up the easement. Property demolished is, what, that's worth 75.
$85,000, $89,900 or whatever, and you gotta spend $20,000 a year, you're gonna net that amount of money. But the other side is, the city has gotten the benefit that it wanted from the easement. That part's been accomplished.
Which was my understanding, that was not on the EDA at the time that was purchased, but that was my understanding was the primary purpose of the purchase. So, if we're comfortable moving on, the Big Woods Study Group and the EDA assemblage, I believe that Dave, Charity have kind of some updates of a marketing.
In the interest of time, Mr. Chairman, we know everybody has somewhere they need to be. What we would say is that Charity has done a significant amount of work to revise and cull and add to the commercial developer Hampton Roads listing. She's also created a brochure document on the front page that's going to be additionally tweaked. And we also, thanks to Director Ward Costello, we have a for sale, we'd like to update the for sale sign on the property and intend to do so on the parcel assemblage. What I would recommend, Mr. Chairman, with your approval, is to give these samples to the directors, and if you have input, please get the input to us at your earliest convenience, because we'd like to proceed with new signage and this direct mailing to the commercial developers. Subsequent to that, it's our intention to contact them by phone and, quite frankly, personally invite them to the site to look at it. I think it's going to require some out-of-the-box thinking at this point to get as much interest as possible in the property, and so we intend to make that a priority in the spring. And this will hopefully set the stage for that. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if we can ask for any feedback back to Dave and Charity by next Monday, the 15th, so that they can go ahead and proceed with getting some mailings out and trying to start some interest in the marketing of that. As for the new proposed signage, will you email out?
Certainly.
The
see
proposed signage there for
see this
feedback
to
as well?
Certainly.
The only initial feedback that I had was, I believe if we do it on the 8 acres, we probably should consider doing something on the corner parcel here of City Hall as well, just so that there is a consistent vision or appearance out there of the opportunity there. Drawing folks in, maybe they don't have an interest in the 8 acres, but they do 3 acres, 4 acres, whatever the opposite side of City Hall is there. In the interest of kind of time, it's budget planning time. Tanya's been gracious enough to join us today to kind of help us kick off that planning. At this point, the goal is that for our February meeting, that we're in a position to vote on a board EDA budget recommendation to take to council. That meeting's scheduled for February 6th. Does that fall in line with your timeline needs? Do you want to give a brief summary of needs or?
Keep in mind, for FY19, will be the first year that you'll have to make a principal payment on your note. So you're looking at a cash need of $157,000 on top of the interest that you'll be paying for the year. So that's something definitely to take into consideration during the planning. That cash will be required.
The interest is about $38,000 a year.
The way the principal falls, it's going to be February, March timeframe of that following year, so you're not going to see any advantage of lesser interest payment for that period. So you're definitely going to have another $38,000 interest due in the top of the principal payments.
And at this point, the only regular income side from bond fees are from the Beth Shalom piece, which just got extended for its construction period. C&U still has an outstanding bond fee. At this point, is the Nansman one about to expire?
I believe the Nansman has expired, it's just the YMCA.
YMCA is the only, okay, thank you. Might have overlooked. Oh, I looked at the wrong line item. Thank you. So, and all said, those total about $21,000, not quite $22,000. So, our recommendation of a budget will be ultimately taken up through council with any ask that we have. And so, I guess be mindful of that. We do have the statement from 12/31 of 17 before you that shows this year's budget, how we're tracking with that. I guess some potential income sources that are on the books. Potentially Bob Moses with a connection fee. Timing of that unknown, I guess. He has submitted a plan for the first stage of comments, but it was lacking in the necessary information to tabulate what a future connection fee would be for his pitcher over at the pond. There is some maintenance fees that are collected annually from his connection to that property. Timing of his purchase of that is an unknown. Questions on the budget at this point? Yes.
Okay. Everyone here has received one of the financial disclosure forms that we do annually. That is due by February 1st, so, and by the way, I don't know if anyone here is even aware, but Judy Wiggins, who normally received that, has retired. So, retired.
I think we would
Evie?
return those to Evie.
Okay.
So that would go to Evie, everyone knows Evie. Good, but you could seal it up and give it to me, whatever you want. But that's the procedure, but it does need, it has to be in. The city gets in trouble if they don't have that information in time, so it's due before February 1st. Just as a.
And our next meeting is scheduled for February 6th, 8:30, back here in council. Any closing comments before we adjourn? Hearing none, then we'll be officially adjourned.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right.